thank you all for being here today. I am from Peabody, so this is like super near and dear to me. I am a Peabody Tanner for life. Today we're here to share stories. Everyone on this panel has become the magical being that they are today in this community and the communities around here through a version of storytelling. So they're each going to give you an intro, and they're each going to tell you a little bit about themselves and how they use storytelling to move forward and thrive in life, right? There's going to be an opportunity for you to ask questions. We're here for an hour, so we're going to get these magical stories, and as that's happening, you'll have an opportunity to think up some questions, and there may be an opportunity for you to ask the question, okay? Any questions?
Yeah.
We're thinking about it.
We're just waiting for hands.
We're waiting for cameras.
Are the mics on?
I saw them go.
Yeah, mics are on.
Yeah, we're good?
Mics on?
Yep, we're good? Okay.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Places, everyone.
Waiting for the share for a minute. I'll do the camera.
Where's the little thing that we use in film? Action. Okay. Welcome to PTV. Thank you for being here today. Today we have a panel of storytellers, storytelling how they became the magical beings that they are today in the different industries and that they represent, organizations, municipalities, and things like that. They use storytelling, some version of it, to help others and to grow. So without further ado, we're going to introduce you to this panel of awesome people. We will start over here to my left. Would you care to tell us your name, what you do, and a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Do I have a copy of my bio? Where'd it go? I'm gonna read it. I just have to read it. My name is Chris O'Keefe. I am a writer and a podcast creator, among other things. I live in Salem. My office is housed in the lovely Creative Collective building. I feel very lucky to have contact with them every single day. Even on the weekends sometimes, because I walk around, they're still there, kind of like doing stuff, breaking down a table or something. I'm like, yeah. I think for me, the storytelling part that is actionable is don't wait for permission to tell the story that you want to tell, right? So I was a copywriter. It was having a decent career, but I wanted to really work in audio. And so rather than knocking on doors and asking for permission, I started a project called Podcation and was able to work with podcast creators from all over the world that I wouldn't have been able to even get on the phone otherwise. I set up, this company and started calling myself the head of narrative. And within 5 years, I was hired by one of the largest podcast agencies in the world to be their creative director. Not because it was BS, but it was manifesting, right? And you, as you're looking at what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, start using present statements. I am this. This is what I do. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the degree. Don't wait for someone to take you into a room and tell you that you are this thing or you're allowed to be this thing. Just be the thing. Tell your own story. So in a very literal way, take control of that story. That would be my story for now. I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Chris. Everybody say thank you, Chris.
Good evening. I'm January Gill ONeil. I am a professor at Salem State, and I'm also a poet. I'm part of the Thursday Poets, which is a collective of writers that work around Salem and the North Shore area. We're also artists and teachers and community members, and we love working with the collective. It's been great. I spend my days when I'm teaching telling students that it's okay to tell your story. I mean, you're the expert on who you are. And so part of my job is making them feel comfortable. But I would also say, lower your expectations. It's just saying, being a storyteller is just saying it simply. I mean, I feel like we've been telling stories all of our lives. We know how to do this. And really, since the earliest days of communication, we call and response. We've been telling these stories. I mean, the town criers, they were telling their stories. That's who we are. And I think we all, as artists, as professionals, I often talk about how entrepreneurs and artists have a lot in common. We're self-starters. We work alone with no expectation of making, a ton of money, but that is, that's nice too. My form of self-expression is poetry. And it really is just about connecting, and not about the big moments, but the small everyday ones. And so keep your story simple, and speak from the heart. You think about the rocket pitch, you think about the elevator pitch. This is really the same thing. It's the story we tell ourselves, because if you don't tell your story, no one else will, or it gets forgotten, or somebody else gets to do it. And so we have this opportunity, and this is a time when we need all voices represented.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Thank you, January.
Speaks to my inner teacher. So hi everybody, my name's Mickey Wilson. A lot of people call me the Dot Connector, and I am the solo CEO of Dot Connector Consulting based in downtown Lynn. And I help people to connect and reconnect to their purpose so that they can build a business that supports the life and lifestyle that they love. It's taken me a lot of years to get that down into that. But the way storytelling has shown up for me is I love telling stories. I've been telling my personal stories more, and my story is an intersection of burnout and branding. So the way I work with my clients is I help them to define, sometimes find, and define their CEO identity. And I like to think of myself as a social impact entrepreneur. So I am one of many who is creating the next generation of modern CEOs who put people before profits, but we need to be profitable at the same time to sustain our business. So I work with clients so that they can amplify their value, their voice, and their visibility so that they can create more opportunities for themselves. And a lot of that storytelling just involves them being vulnerable and sharing their experiences and how they solve problems. And before I pass it off, I will share a bit of research I've done with all my clients. Every client I've worked with thus far, their market has been a representation of them at a certain part of their story, and they're honestly trying to help somebody solve a problem that nobody could help them solve. So that's how I help my clients with storytelling and by telling stories.
Thank you, Nikki.
Hello, I'm Jason Consalvo. I'm a community business banker at Salem 5. I have been at the bank for, it'll be 21 years next month. I started as a teller and worked my way through college, so I'm a banker, a recovering artist. And it's a long road, but I'm hoeing it the way I can. So, storytelling is very much a part of business in general. Obviously, we've got a lot of creative entrepreneurs, both in the room and on the panel. Sadly, very many times I get to be the one that helps people adjust their expectations. So part of the storytelling, I think, comes in two pieces for my job. I have to tell people my story and how I connect with them and how I can, make the things happen that they need to have happen. And then the other part, so selling yourself. Selling is all, that's what it is. They need to understand what you can do for them and who you are as a person and as a professional. The other half is obviously understanding the story, the vision that somebody has for their own life, and explaining to them what we can do and what I can do to help them achieve that goal. I find the more I speak to my friends and my family and my therapist, the more I realize that the happiness in life is really the delta between your expectations for your life and what is actually happening. So just like business, you can make more money or you can spend less money. But so you either have to adjust your expectations down to meet where you are, or you need to really figure out how to boost yourself up. So money is a way to boost yourself up in many instances. And so I help people with that, but it's, we are all selling, we're all just selling people a way to get from here to where they want to be. And, you'd rather go on that journey with a friend and somebody that you trust and that cares about your business. And I try to be that where I can, and to the people I say no to, they don't feel that way. So.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, it's my turn. You cover everything.
That's
What
it.
do I have to say?
Good luck.
My name is Rosario Viraminaya. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation to join the panel. And I'm currently the director for Raw Artworks. We are an organization based in Lynn, and we focus on the intersection between creative youth development and expressive art therapy. So we use art as a tool for addressing mental health in our youth. And we are pretty good at it. We do great work. But also, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a social entrepreneur business where I focus on creating opportunities for creatives of color to have a stage for expressive arts and being able to use art as a tool for engagement, for changing narratives, for telling stories, for really bringing representation. When we are in spaces, especially in spaces that bring community together. So I feel that in order to get to that point, storytelling for me was more about my personal story and going through the journey of finding myself, who I am, and also understanding that I had a voice. So being able to really get to the point where I feel comfortable telling my story, where I don't want someone else telling a version of a story that is supposedly representing me or the communities that I represent. So with that in mind, I started to go through that process, and that took me into the journey of really, embracing my narrative and the narratives of my communities, and bring others along and creating more opportunities for that. So I feel like as a storyteller, I'm actually disrupting narratives and bringing, voices that are not, fully represented, and bringing all those other components in the stories that are already existing, where I feel like there's a gap. We need more of that. So through my work, I've done a lot of work with cultural institutions and museums and other, spaces where there's already a level of interpretation on the walls with the art or the collection, but it feels that, there's only one aspect of it being presented. So being able to do that kind of like exploration of how we can tell the story differently, and what are all the other pieces that we can bring as a part of the experience, so these stories resonate with different people. So I do that through curated experiences and being able to, use expressive arts as a tool for doing that. Some of my work includes Punto Urban Art Museum, for example, but also a lot of like interactive experiences at Peabody Essex Museum, or the work that we are doing in communities rooted in like really grassroots, opportunities and activities with community residents that are already coming together. They're already telling their stories. So bringing that into a more of a center stage, so they feel that, they're also represented. So I made a business out of that. So that's great. Thank you.
Hi. Not nervous. It's fine. We're fine.
She's okay.
My name's Anna Dugan. I'm known as mural artist. Anna did a thing. I'm a muralist. I do a lot of public art. Murals from public art to commercial work. I kind of paint on anything. Like John, I feel like has become the person that's been like, oh, what do you have to paint? Yeah, Anna will paint that. Like, and it's true. I probably will. And when it comes to storytelling, it's like, oh, an artist telling stories through work, that's crazy. Like, as an artist, like, you are constantly creating visuals to a story, whether you realize it or not. And I think I found my stride and my creative voice when I finally stopped asking, what do people want to hear? I stopped asking that of myself, like, what space am I trying to fill for other people? It was, what do I need to hear? And it wasn't until I started telling stories more authentically about myself, or like, if you follow me on social media, you probably know a lot about my life. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's totally fine. But I've found that I've made really very deep connections with people through my art, but I think more often than not, it's through authentically sharing things about what's happening in my life, or my perspective on things, or, you know, stories about my life that felt very isolating, because I swear every time I like go online or whatever, I'm like, oh, my life is like not unique at all. Like, there's like so many people out there that experience very similar things. But there are certain parts of life that I did not know were normal, or did not know I wasn't alone in, until I started hearing other people tell their stories, and it gave me the courage to tell my own. So yeah, I feel like storytelling, it's essential to art making. I just think that, like, that's fine. But I think it's one of the most authentic ways to build community and to build real authentic connection with people. Yeah, and just not asking what do people want to hear from me, but like, what do I want to say instead. So that's my story.
Well, it's hard to be at this end of this table, because everyone has really diverse and like covered everything already. But my name is Katie Nabandi, and I am with the Creative Collective, and we do storytelling for all of our members and the community here across the North Shore. So that is a very unique thing. But I will say a little bit more about my background, which is that I actually studied theater in undergraduate and minored in communications. And of course, there's a lot there for how people approach storytelling in the theater space. And it taught me a lot about characters and conflict and setting. And so actually I wore my shirt, my Kodo shirt today, because it kind of hones in on a story that I wanted to share about Kodo and its connection to my story. So actually, it's a great place. So finding a setting is important. It's a great place in our community in Salem, which had started to build a community. You know, you talk about community connection a lot, and actually my story here has a lot to do with that as well. Take a breath. Okay. So yeah, and in 2015, when I was finishing school, I came to Kodo. There was an open mic that had just moved there, and I was recording some folks. Again, already learning that I enjoy doing storytelling, sharing other people's work, things that were going on in my community as I was growing, and that was also building in and of itself. And in that space, I met Joey Phoenix, who a lot of you know, is now a member of the Creative Collective. It was on our team for a long time, and they reached out to me wondering what I was doing, recording these artists, and that's how actually I met John and the team at the time back in 2015. So I think that, you know, finding a place where your story begins is important. So I guess I'm talking a little bit more about the anatomy of the story in a lot of ways, but I think it's an important thing to think about. It can be really overwhelming to say, okay, like, what am I telling my story? What is my story? But if you can break it down to those things, and some of my composition teachers and writing teachers would be like, yes, thank you for sharing this. Because it's hard. There's so many things that we could talk about on any given day. A feeling, just a rendition of something that happened to you that day. But if you think about a big picture story, and I think in my position here at Creative Collective, I struggle with this a lot because there's so much that y'all are doing all the time, and I don't know exactly what to focus on, how to tell the story even as a group, as a collaborative thing. What is this magical thing that we're doing, that we're building, and that we're supporting each other? And if I think in pieces like this with characters and setting, it makes it a little bit easier to dive into in any format, whether that turns into a play somehow in my practice as a performer, or writing or creating TikTok or reels. And I will say also our lovely Ariel, who's out here doing coverage, is also a theater actress and has a big background in that piece of storytelling. So I think that's really lucky that we have a couple people on this.
She's currently doing content.
All of your really brilliant stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then she's working. I was saying that you also have a background in theater, so I think there's something to say for like the skill set that allows, us to think through how we tell stories and the way that things are evolving quickly. I did have an interesting conversation, I'll just finish with this, about all of the, like I was saying, all the breadth of ways that we can tell stories. Everything's becoming more digital, everything's fast, everything's it seems a little less personal because we're not sitting in a room like this talking to each other face to face. And I think that the digital world is not going anywhere, but if we can continue to make time for talking face to face, whether that's one-on-one or in a group setting, a performance setting, whatever that looks like, I think it's really critical for the health and future of storytelling. So yeah, I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Katie.
So now that we've done our introductions, thank you all. So I am a teacher, I do teach at Raw, but I didn't have you guys say thank you because I wanted to bring you back to my students' age, but because every story is a choice to tell, like Katie just said. You choose as a storyteller to tell a piece of your story, and that piece of your story is very yours. So for you to give a piece of you to someone that you've never met, someone that you don't know, it takes a lot. For some people it takes an extraordinary amount to sift through and navigate through to be able to tell that piece and give that piece to somebody that they don't know. So thank you all for sharing that with us. And does anybody have any questions for any of these magnificent people? Questions can be about their journey, their process, their actual job, who they are, their difficulties, their struggles. Any questions?
I have a question for Keith, for Chris O'Keefe. How much energy should we put into monetizing your podcast when you first start?
What is your name?
J-Bar.
Daybar.
Yeah.
So Daybar.
None. There are better ways to make money than having a podcast. So you can, I always think of it in terms of getting to revenue, not profit, right? Like you can start making some revenue, but if you want it to be a profit center, you might just want to ask Jason for a teller job, and like, just go punch in somewhere and get a paycheck and whatnot. You should be doing that version of storytelling because you need to, or because you want to, or because it's going to feed into something else or complement something else. Monetizing a podcast for podcast's sake, the odds are very much against you for that. So it should fit into a larger strategic plan. Yes, that's what I would say.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
No more questions? Really?
I
So,
have a question.
thank you, Rita.
Hi, I'm Rita. When did you start calling yourself an artist or whatever version of poet? I asked this question in January and a few minutes ago, but like, when did you have the courage or the wherewithal to say, yeah, I'm an artist, or I'm a writer, or, because these are all sort of, they seem very lofty goals, and I'm just curious, when you had the courage to do that, did it take a while before you sort of embraced it?
So this is for anybody in particular,
I
or?
want to hear from you.
I raised my hand.
She asked a question and I was ready because I've had this discussion.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked to John like since I've known him about the whole journey to being like self-actualized as an artist. And I think for a very, very long time, I had this like idea that the word artist was like calling yourself a genius. It was like, God, how pretentious of me to be like, I'm an artist. I went to art school like the whole time. And even before that, being an artist or being a creative or being a poet or being a podcaster, being any sort of artist, it's innate to who you are. It's not a job, in my opinion. But it took me a long time to become comfortable with that because I put that title on a pedestal because I felt like the way I was defining it was different to what it actually is. So in my mind, I couldn't hold the title artist until I was a full-time artist, until I was monetizing off of my art, until I was doing art in and out all day, every day. And when I started doing chalk art at Gulu Gulu Cafe, this was like what feels like a million years ago now, but that's kind of where my public art career started. I remember like having to train myself. I'd talk to my friends or I'd talk to my husband and I'd be like, oh my God, okay, I am a chalk artist, technically speaking, because I do art with chalk. And it's like, dude, you're a chalk art, like relax, it's okay. I felt like I had to slowly start training myself to say it so I would believe it so that I could own it. And now, yes, I am a full-time artist. So it's like, I don't know what else I would call myself. But even before, I feel like I try to give this advice to other people that you don't have to monetize off of your artwork to be an artist. You can literally you could sing songs in your shower and be like, I'm a singer. I'm a damn bad singer, but like I'm still a singer. It's all about your perception and your definition of things and you owning it. You don't need a time frame. You don't just start saying it. Similar to what Chris had said earlier, you just have to start owning it. You just have to start saying it, whether that's slowly, whether it's to yourself, whether it's to your friend. It doesn't like. Danny can vouch for this, my best friend can vouch for this, that I'd be like, oh, it's so weird. I feel like I can like call myself an artist now. And like, I had to start saying it out loud to start feeling comfortable before I would be able to say, hi, my name's Anna, I'm a public artist, even before I went full time. Because if they don't believe it, or if I don't believe it, they won't believe it, you know? So it can take some time, but just start today. You can start now if you want, you don't have to, but yeah, just claim it for yourself.
Can I give
1 second?
Yeah.
Just to that.
Yeah.
Jason wants to talk and Jen wants to talk.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, the counterpoint to that, I sat in Google while you were making those boards saying, wow, what an awesome artist. So it's a self-perception thing too. From day one, when I saw you in there, I thought, professional, amazing, the boards look great. What a great business tool. I'm psyched that they're hiring a local artist. At no point did I question.
Meanwhile, I saw myself as like a rabid squirrel, like oh my God, like what am I doing?
My point is like own it, because someone out there is going to look at what you do and they're going to see that, and so like own that piece. If you create in any way, shape, or form, and anyone will know like that knows me, the creation process of anything, creating community, creating art, like that is your story. Own that piece of it. It doesn't really matter what anyone else calls you if you feel that. And I mean, I think with you, what I watched was the second you owned it, you flourished.
Yeah.
Like professionally, financially,
yeah.
Like things you get to do with your time now. So
it's pretty amazing what it does
that.
when you do make that mental switch, because I think I was ready for a lot longer than I let myself believe, because I would not allow myself to call myself what I was. And once I owned it, it was like, oh yeah, like this is actually pretty cool. And yeah, it's true. It is.
Jason, you want to go?
Expectations and what's actually happening. She lived in a gap for many years because I don't know Anna. We've met at these events before, but she is an artist. She's also a business owner. She's also a wife. She's lots of things. Who has kids in this room? Right. Dana, what did you do to earn the title of father? Just kidding. We know what you did. We know exactly what you did. Okay? The point is that your journey to get to the name or the title or whatever it is that you call yourself is important to you, right? I titled myself a recovering artist as a joke. I also went to art school and, have a degree in illustration and worked at the bank during that time and obviously since that time. But for me and some people are more comfortable living in a place of subjectivity every day of their lives. That is not my strength. I prefer to bring some objectivity to my subjective clients and friends' lives. But even when I describe myself as an artist now, you're right. There's still an element of that in me. I'm like an artist because everyone who's an artist, everybody who's done art has, had the lay person. Is that elitist sounding? I don't know. Like, oh my God, you can draw so well. I'm like, yeah, man, I can draw really well. My son plays the piano. I'm like, you're really good at that. He's like, yeah. But he's 10, so he's a psychopath by definition. It's an interesting point. I have found the need to describe myself as I've grown older and find outlets for my creativity in different ways. During the day, I untangle people's complicated problems and find a way to give them some money. And when I'm at home, I build things or fix things. And so I've described myself as I got older as more of a craftsman than an artist. But when you think about it, you're making problems for yourself when you're arguing with yourself about what you should be called or what you should be not. She went to school for 4 years. We've all accomplished far more with far less work and called ourselves that thing. So, adjust your own expectations for yourself first, and then you're automatically happier. It's exciting.
Jen?
Yeah. Well, let me give you a more nuanced answer than what I gave you out there. I mean, I really do think that on some level you have to claim it. And it's a really hard thing to do because you're saying I matter and this is important to me. And by doing that, it allows you to claim even more time. Once you know what your center is, and that's true for anything that we do, so whether it's some form of art or it's jogging, playing guitar, whatever it is that's important to you. When you claim that thing, then that's you saying to everybody else, this is important to me. And so you just build towards that. And so I would imagine that you might do some art towards that. You might figure out what it is that's keeping you from claiming that. And my goodness, what's the worst that might happen? I mean, when you claim that intention, you pull things to you, And I think all of us probably can share a story offline about that. So you're already an artist, So now you're just telling people. So you just say it to yourself like a mantra. I'm an artist. I'm an artist. Doing an errand. I'm an artist, but I'm picking up groceries, or I'm doing the day stuff that pays the bills, and then I'm working to do more in my craft. So the practical thing I would say is, do gratitude journals in general are great for just sort of setting that intention and then claiming it. It may not happen all at once, but you'll get there.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What I was gonna mention is more about in my case, I don't call myself an artist. I call myself a creative because the artist piece has a certain definition. I don't make certain art like the traditional art. So it's okay. So I grew up in a family of artists, and they were all so pretentious. And I was like, oh, they're better than me, and they're making all this amazing art. So where do I fit in? So it was more about that creative process and coming to it through a totally completely different angle. And it wasn't until I came into spaces where there's a community of creatives, where I felt like I was seen and heard, that I started to feel oh, okay, maybe it's okay, maybe I can call myself a creative. And I needed to take that step because that kind of flame was already in me, but I wasn't comfortable in saying it, like it has been mentioned. But I felt in a way I needed a little bit of validation, and I didn't see that coming, as very explicit, but it came through developing these connections and being in spaces where, I felt that, I belong. So it's okay. And when people started to call me a creative, I was like, oh, okay, I earned it. So yeah, check. And you know, I started to claim it, and I'm very comfortable with it now.
Thank you, Rosario.
Thank you, Rosario.
Real quick, this is like a therapy session. Like, great question. Look at, you know, we're all sort of pouring our hearts out, and you just gave me a flashback that reminded me there are subdivisions of artists too, right? Like now that you're working in chalk, you might be getting into calligraphy and feel really shaky there and not be able to call yourself that. And you reminded me of, I used to be at lunch or having a pint, and I'd be writing poetry, and I would write "to do" at the top of it because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to be writing poetry, and if anybody came by, I would be like, "Oh, I'm just working on my grocery list," you know, or whatever. And when we talk about like transmitting who you are, transmitting intention, that 22, 23-year-old kid probably would have met a lot of people, you know, openly embracing the poet, you know, and being in there. So don't wait, and don't, when you get comfortable calling yourself one kind of artist, what are you going for next, and start calling yourself that as well.
So we've heard a lot. How do you feel?
Great question.
Do you feel inspired? Yeah. So you're in many positions, right? We can figure out which positions are as your soul stirs through this conversation. But like, I personally have been doing poetry pretty much my whole life. All through high school, I didn't become a performing poet until after I was a parent. But it was one day I got a phone call from somebody that I knew from my childhood that was now running a huge organization in Boston. And she wanted me to read a poem at a conference that she was having. This was all virtual, it was still COVID scared. And the amount of money that I was paid to do a poem, one poem, it changed. I mean, you could talk to John about the conversations we had after that. Like, I didn't know it was even possible. And you take yourself for granted as a creative person more often than not. Like Jason with the reality, the expectations and reality and all, that's real, because I didn't care about the money, because I cared about, you know, moving people and getting people to feel something. But that caused me to live a life of homelessness and struggle that lasted well over a decade through raising my children. So there has to be balance. But that balance won't come if you don't give yourself value and worth. And I have to say thank you, Rosario, and thank you, John, and thank you to the organizations that are from the North Shore that see artists and ask them to perform and don't give them an excuse as to why they can't pay. Because art is valuable, and we're talking about storytelling. We are the storytellers of life. If it weren't for the artists and the creative beings, it doesn't matter whether they're a musician or town crier or a painter or dot connector, it doesn't matter. If they didn't do what they did, we wouldn't have history books. We wouldn't have legacy. We wouldn't have history. We wouldn't have anything. They write it down, they put it into a song, they paint it on a wall, on a canvas, on a carpet, and it stays there for the story to continue. So, anybody else have any questions? You have people in this room that have a whole business dedicated to opening their doors to people that want to create something. Wendy, Pasquale.
I got a question. I know a lot of you guys call yourself one thing. Obviously, you have wear many hats. Do you find as you take on more and more roles that you're telling more and more stories, or do you find that you're condensing this story into something more true, like a simpler truth?
So
It's a really good question.
it is a good question, and I'll say for me, just in strictly business sense. So I'll use Anna's example because we've been doing it on that. So she did a thing I don't know.
I don't do that thing.
When you have, and I'm teasing, but like there
No,
are
that
these
name's
moments
story
and where people say, I do everything. I'm a banker, I'm an artist, I do this, I do that, I do all these things. But none of your friends will ever come to you and say, I need somebody who does all those things, right? You're not sacrificing a piece of who you are to tell a condensed, specific story about what value you bring to the world. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every time you open your mouth. I was in an organization, we was a 30-second elevator pitch every time you stood up. You wanted to say anything, and I say a lot of things. You had to say it when you stood up. I'm Jason Consalvo. I'm the banker you want on your team when it's time to grow your business. Simple, right? So there's an expanded version. If it's time to grow your business and your idea is to call your bank instead of your banker, then we should be talking. So those types of things. When you talk to your friends and they say, golly, I can't get somebody on the phone at my bank. Chris routinely says, I know exactly who you should call. And says, you should talk to Jason. And even that person, he didn't even need to talk to me. He still came in, we sat down, we had a good conversation. But don't be afraid to say one thing. I don't say like, well, but I also do this and I also do this. I'll just say this one thing, exist on that, and now that person has a very specific directive for how to send you business, for how to support you and your goals. And you don't have to say that to the next person. You can say whatever you want to the next person, and that person will be sending you that business or those things. But you can't be everything to everybody. But it will help you to get a very specific type of business and grow from there if you have a very condensed story that tells you exactly what people should be listening for. If every time somebody says the word podcast, I know exactly who to send them to. Right? If there's a creative who wants to grow their business, I know exactly who to send them to. Not because they can't do other things. Presumably, I don't know if they do anything else. I know exactly who those people are. So don't be afraid to narrow your pitch, because you'll get a lot of that thing. And if you need to narrow it for somebody else, then those people will send you different things. But so it's hard to be everything to everybody. So don't be afraid to narrow that pitch.
Let me keep up first.
I'm going to answer that question, I think, in a different perspective. My ADHD is wanting me to answer Rita's question still, so I'm having internal struggle. Thank you. That actually helps. But to answer your question, I'm going to speak about how I use, not necessarily, I'm going to weave this all into one. I've never known what I'm going to be, and I'm continuing to self-actualize every day. And what's important to me about working with my clients is I want them to define their CEO. So I call myself a chief energy orchestrator because I was born a CEO. You all are born CEOs because you are the CEO of your life. And I believe everybody is born with a brand identity. You have a name. Your inner child had specific dreams about what you wanted to do, and my job is to weave that into people. So I am undefined, but I've also known who I am as Mickey Wilson since the day I've shown up in this world. To answer the question about telling stories, because as a dot connector, I take in a lot of stories and a lot of people's energies and their pains and their problems. And it's my job to either solve it or send them to the right person that I know will solve it so that they have the shortest distance between their pain and the solution, which will bring them joy. So I do a lot of coffee chats, and I actually took them offline because the business side of me is like, this is not a very valuable thing. I'm not making money on it, but yet I still felt the value of solving a problem. So I had to figure out a way to make it mutually beneficial. So as a person that literally collects stories, my job is to also knowledge share because I didn't know how to start a business. And even though I had a business degree, I never saw myself as the person starting the business. I always saw myself as the person that worked for the person that ran the business, and I was comfortable in there. And if you ever just want to grow in life every single day till you die, just become an entrepreneur. But to answer that question, is I've put my coffee chats back up because I realize that in every conversation I have with someone, I am able to lessen their pain, whether it's just by actively listening or giving them a connection or giving them a resource that helps solve the problem, thus eliminate the pain. So I brought these chats back online so I can use them as a way to write content through an email series that really talks about the problems people come to me with in a coffee chat, how I solve them, because my hope and goal is that that solves somebody else's problem that may not have come to me for whatever reason. I try to make myself as accessible as possible, but I'm a business, right? It's that profitability piece, or I like to call it more prosperity because I'm not in it for the riches by any means. But I find that when I have this arsenal of really rich stories and these problems that people have solved, I'm really just a mirror that reflects people's genius. So I find that being a mirror is great. I call it my magic trick because I am just reconnecting your thought dots in a way that makes sense to you from outside of the box, from a fresh perspective, to expand your perspective. But it's my job as a chief energy orchestrator to share these solutions with the world for people that are in that first year of business that may be introverted and not ready to ask me to help connect the dots, but I just want to share more of that knowledge because sometimes people don't know they're going to start a business until they start a business, and having valuable resources and connections helps you become a sustainable business.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, just a quick to build on both of those things, right? We're here because we want sustainable businesses and we want to do it being creative. What Jason said about narrowing, and I'm sorry, what was your name? Pascal, thank you for asking another great question, right? Just give keeps on giving. When Jason talked about narrowing your story, that's for your identity, but you should narrow your story for your offering as well, right? Because people might not always want to hire a chef, but they want to buy a cheeseburger. Right? So like, what's your cheeseburger? Like, what's your 10 by 10 mural, chalk mural, $12,000, whatever it is, right? On the website, cool. Now we have a starting point. They might want to add pickles. They might want to add tomatoes. They might want, a smaller version of it. But you're having the same conversation, because I think a struggle an artist can get is like the knowledge gap, the understanding. They think that they might be buying a $50 product and it might be a $500 product or a $5,000 product, because art is so undervalued. So in addition to narrowing the story that you tell about yourself, narrow the story that you're telling about your offering, that can help, because people like to buy products.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? No? I think if anything you take away from today, I hope it's to understand that giving up is not an option. Everybody that's on this table, on this panel, has had to go through unimaginable things on a personal level, geographically, faithfully, like within every angle and level that you can think of. They've had to sort through and sift through something to get to where they are. And many a times they probably didn't have the support that they wanted or the support that they needed, but they did it. So you can. There's many people in this room that can help you make those connections. So take advantage of that. Silence will get you nowhere. So maybe you didn't want to ask a question now, but before we leave this building today, take a moment and meet somebody. Take a moment and introduce yourself to somebody that you don't know, even if you don't talk business or ideas. But introduce yourself to somebody that you don't know. Take a walk through this building and get to see all the opportunities that you have for growth. You personally, for growth here, towards whatever vision you have for yourself. Hopefully you got some ideas off of this panel. Hopefully you'll get their business cards and find out more about what they do and all the other things that they are magical at. Thank you all for being here today, sharing your magic and not giving up, and seeing value in those that need your help, and for being that person that you need it. Thank you. Thank you.